mezzo del cammin de nostra vita mi trovai per una silva oscura che la dorita via era semarata. Now my Italian is really rusty, but in English those words read, midway along the journey of our life, I woke to find myself in a dark wood, for I had wandered off the straight path. These are the opening lines of Dante's Divine Comedy, an epic poem on the scale of Homer's Iliad or Virgil's Aeneid, but with a new and remarkably Christian focus. Unlike Homer or Virgil, Dante does not focus on the martial prowess of great heroes like Achilles, Odysseus, or Aeneas. Instead, Dante casts himself as both the hero of the story and a humble pilgrim in search of God. But he is not so unlike Odysseus or Aeneas, who themselves undertook harrowing journeys through the underworld. It is an important theme in Western literature for the hero to cross the threshold into a realm utterly unlike anything else they've ever experienced, oftentimes to retrieve a treasure or find out new information they never could have otherwise received. In the Divine Comedy, Dante the Pilgrim journeys through the realms of the afterlife, even the horrors of the Inferno, in search of Dante's true home in heaven. The Divine Comedy is divided into 3 sections, each of which correspond to the realms of the afterlife to which a person may go depending on their relationship with God, mediated through the work of Jesus Christ. You have the Inferno, or hell, Purgatorio, or purgatory, a realm in which unconfessed sins are purged from the soul, hence the name, and Paradiso, or heaven, where souls dwell with God in unending bliss. This seems like a rather serious work, so why the title, The Divine Comedy? Well, in the ancient world, you had 2 major genres of literature, tragedies and comedies. Tragedies included works like Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, while comedies included works from Roman authors like Terence and Plautus, who basically wrote sitcoms. Tragedies begin in happiness and good fortune, but they end in misery, while comedies begin in misery and end in happiness and bliss. In Dante's Divine Comedy, the work begins in misery, the Inferno, the horrors of hell, but gets better as Dante enters through other realms of the Christian afterlife, the Purgatorio and the Paradiso, so that when Dante reaches the end of Paradiso, he sees a vision of God and all the angels surrounding God's throne. While the subject matter is much more serious than the typical comedy, Dante's work still begins in misery and ends in happiness. The divine part was added later. Few other works so perfectly meld the classical past with its host of heroes, monsters, and villains, through which Dante interweaves Christian thought and doctrine, the literary heritage of Virgil and Ovid, and the philosophy of Thomas Aquinas and Augustine, amongst others, to produce an awe-inspiring work, the likes of which few authors from any era ever complete. There are some 600 citations from the Bible, verses 400 from Aristotle and 200 from Virgil, as if Dante is deliberately trying to balance ancient Greek works with the Christian worldview that had nurtured Dante. And the influence of Dante is still seen today, or rather, it is still heard. When Italy unified in the 1870s, they needed to choose one Italian dialect for the whole of the Italian peninsula to speak. They chose the Tuscan dialect, because that was the dialect in which Dante composed the Divine Comedy, followed by other great Italian writers like Petrarch and Boccaccio, who also wrote in the same Tuscan dialect. It is all the more significant that Dante wrote his epic in vernacular Italian, the language that common people spoke, as opposed to classical Latin, in which Dante's favorite poems were composed. This is a great shift in the medieval world. Furthermore, Dante wrote his Divine Comedy in a poetic meter known as terza rima. In a line of terza rima, each stanza, the poetic equivalent of a paragraph, has 3 lines, tercets, and the first and third lines rhyme with each other. Then the second line determines the rhyme scheme for the first and third lines of the next stanza. If we go back to the first lines of the Divine Comedy, we can see how terza rima works. The first and third lines marked with the letter A rhyme. Then the second line of the first stanza determines the rhyme scheme for the first and third lines of the second stanza. And the second line of the second stanza determines the rhyme scheme for the first and third lines of the third stanza, and so on. The beautiful song-like quality of the Italian language made it possible for Dante to utilize a rhyme scheme this intricate, and sadly, the English language cannot replicate it. Did you notice too, each stanza has 3 lines of poetry? That's not accidental. That each line of poetry is arranged into groups of 3 emphasizes the nature of the Trinity, the manner in which God exists as 3 unique persons, all of whom are equal in their divine essence: God the Father, Jesus Christ the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The number 3 abounds in Dante's Divine Comedy. There are 3 realms: hell, purgatory, and heaven, and each of the 3 poems has 33 cantos. The Inferno has 34, but the very first canto is more of a prelude to the preceding 33 cantos that follow after it. The Inferno itself is made up of 9 circles, or 3 groups of 3. Nice job, Dante.